Hello everyone. Thank you for coming to the November edition of the Austin Blockchain Collective Community Meetup. It happens every month, every third Monday of every month, here in this room here at Capital Factory. Thank you, Capital Factory. It will continue, I believe, to run throughout 2019 here on the third Monday of every month. So that would be good. Continuity is great. My name is Pete Harris. I am the Exec Director of the Austin Blockchain Collective, and Joshua was here a second ago, but he's wandered off, so I'm not going to introduce him. Yeah, so I'm going to do a little bit of intro. We've got quite a full program tonight. We've got 3 supporting presentations, of which I know at least one of them is here. The second person I don't think is here and hasn't sent me his slides. The third person I think probably will be here. And then I'm presenting, and so if the other presenters don't come, I've got more time. So I don't frankly give a shit whether they turn up. So, okay, let's carry on, shall we? Okay, Austin Blockchain Collective, what is it, what it's about? We've got a very simple mission, which is it's really to put Austin on the global blockchain map. And how are we going to do that? We're going to advocate for, showcase and nurture all of the blockchain and crypto innovation happening in Austin, of which there's a lot. Almost 130 companies right now in the blockchain and crypto space, have a presence here in Austin, which we think is, I think, a reasonable reason why we should be on a global map. So we're going to try and get it better known. We are tangibly doing some things that are getting us more known. So, for instance, next month, a lady will be here from the Australian Trade and Investment Commission. And she's very interested in bringing Australian companies here and helping Austin companies do certain things in Australia, like clinical trials. Australia is very big on clinical trials, apparently. So she'd like to do that. So anyway, I digress a bit on to next month. These are the kind of the important facts you need to know. The website austinblockchaincollective.com. If you go there, there are links from there to just about everything that you need to know. So we've got a blog, there's a link there. We've got a Twitter feed, there's a link there. A LinkedIn group, there's a link there. So if you just go away from tonight with that website, it's a great place to start. There's also, you can type in your email and get on our emailing list, and it tells you some things about what we're doing and asks you to send us emails. So it's a good place to start. If you like Twitter, our handle is ATX Block Collect. Our Twitter handle is Austin Blockchain. If you tweet things and include Austin Blockchain in the tweets, someone will magically like them and retweet them. Not me. Well, I do sometimes, but yeah, it does happen. And actually, Austin Blockchain Month should not be on here. That was from last month. But October was Austin Blockchain Month. We did it. We were involved with 12 events in the blockchain space in October. And if you look at our blogs, last week's blog, I think, there was lots of. There's a blog post with lots of links to video recordings of things that went on. So our blog's a great place to find out what we're doing. Okay, moving swiftly on, we are full of passion about blockchain in Austin, and passion is a great thing, but it does not pay the bills, doesn't pay my rent or my dog's biscuits. And so we have, thankfully, some supporters of our cause who provide us both financially and in kind, and are the top rank of supporter, if you like, we call patrons, and we've got currently 3 of them, certainly looking for more. And if anyone would like to be one, I can tell you about the great things that are bestowed upon you as a patron. Wan Chain's been with us since the very beginning. Nem came on board a couple of months ago, and also 212 about a month ago. So if anyone came to the town hall at the end of October downstairs, you'd have heard from all of those companies saying interesting things. So our patrons don't only help us financially, they help us in terms of intellectual content, which is the way we like it. We have some other companies providing both in-kind and financial support. We have Capital Factory, which are great partners who provide us with room space for meetings like this, and for our town hall, and for some ad hoc meetings. Pouch Points is Joshua's company, and Joshua has now arrived on his scooter in the back. Who else? Vault Wallet is very pretty recent company. Where's Corey tonight? He's downstairs at the bar. Okay, so we're getting lots of support from our supporters. He'll be here soon. So a number of supporters. Again, we kind of actively work with our patrons and supporters on a number of activities to especially help them along the way. That said, any company with a presence, any blockchain or crypto company with a presence here in Austin can be a basic member for free, and they get some things out of that. So tonight's agenda, great. We'll start in a moment with, as we always do, with some shout outs. We've got 3 short presentations scheduled. Then we've got a longer presentation from me. And then there'll be some networking, and we've got to be out of the room by 9. And if people want to go to the bar downstairs and mingle and chat, they can do. Moving on to shout outs. Does anyone have a shout out? So shout outs are just people getting up and saying, I am so and so, or I'm doing this and I need help, or I'm hiring, or I've just arrived. You sir, come either shout out quite loudly or come use the microphone. I don't mind. But this should be being live streamed, and the live stream should be being archived to YouTube, and if those things happen, there'll be a link.
Hi, I'm Dylan. I was a student at UT Austin. Now I'm based in San Francisco, working on a company called Abacus. So Abacus is a security token issuance and administration platform backed by Y Combinator, Coinbase, Justin Kan, among others. I'm also hosting a meetup tomorrow at the same room from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on security tokens. So hope to see some of you guys there.
Great. And we tweeted about your meetup today. Yes, we did, and put it on our blog today. And if you don't know that, you need to be following our tweets and looking at our blog. Okay, anyone for any more shout outs, hiring? Either shout or come here, it's fine. Hi, man.
Hi, I'm John Bush, and we're doing decentralized waste management. If anybody's got a commercial dumpster or a pilot, you can lower your waste bill. So, looking for pilot commercial dumpsters, if anybody's got that, we can deliver them.
How do people find you?
ZeroWasteAdvocacy.com. So, we've got a breaking jobs act path to a token distribution event. So, that'll probably happen on January. Website ZeroWasteAdvocacy.com, which is the commercial pilot. Have one. You can email me at
Okay. Very good. Any more for any more? Joshua.
I just want to legitimize this guy. I heard their story last week at the North Texas Blockchain Association showcase that I went to. So they were telling the arbitrage story. So
Ah,
pretty legit stuff. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, no worries. I just
very good.
heard it in a week, so I had to say something.
Very good. Okay. With that, if there's no more shout outs, I'm going to start the main program with Stephen from CoinClear, I think. Is that right? Yes, you are. Good. You sent me your slides, and I have them. Unlike the person who didn't send me their slides, not. Yeah. Let me do this preview window. View full screen. Like that. Okay, good. Over to you.
Cool. Thank you. Let me make sure. Okay, hey everybody. For those of you who don't know me, which looking around, it's probably most of you, I'm Stephen Butchko. I'm the executive editor at a website called Coin Central. We put out blockchain and cryptocurrency news and educational resources. And I'm also a co-founder and the CEO of CoinClear, which is what I'm going to be talking to you guys about today. So CoinClear, our mission is to provide financial inclusivity through simple investment strategies. And to kind of rephrase that with a lot less marketing buzzwords, CoinClear is a mobile app that automates cryptocurrency investments. So even now with all the resources out there, crypto investing is still tough and intimidating to a lot of people. For instance, every month I'm still buying Bitcoin and Ethereum for my dad and having him Venmo me the money just because he's too scared to do it himself. And there's a few reasons why for that. One, it's difficult to diversify. You know, even now, Coinbase is the easiest way. Coinbase is still offering only, 5 different cryptocurrencies now. To really do a good job diversifying, you have to have multiple accounts across several exchanges. And getting to the next point, a lot of those exchanges are pretty difficult to use. They're not meant for the casual investor. Instead, they're meant for traders who need order books, do margin trading, stop losses, things like that. And overall, there's just a big knowledge gap in the industry. As you can see here, Blockchain Capital did a survey last fall, and 42% of millennials agree that most people will be using Bitcoin within the next 10 years, yet only 4% have ever owned any. So clearly there's a huge gap in the market, and that's what we're solving for right now. So without going into too much detail on this slide, basically CoinClear provides one-click diversification. Really our bread and butter is in our automations, which I'll get to in the next slide. We also provide education and news resources to help people learn more about cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. So we make it as easy as 1, 2, 3. First, after creating an account, you just choose your portfolio. We have a couple templates to help people who don't really know what they should be choosing, just one consisting of all of Bitcoin and then one half Bitcoin, half Ethereum. But you know, if you're a little bit more knowledgeable in the industry, you can create your own portfolio with whatever coins that you want. Second is choose your automations. Starting out, we're following the Acorns model where basically we round up your change and invest it for you. So if you go to buy a cup of coffee, it's $2.50. We round that up to $3. Take that 50 cents of spare change and invest that into your portfolio for you automatically. So really it's a set it and forget it. And although we're starting with that, that's really what we're focusing on moving forward as well. So our goal is for you to be able to customize whatever automations you want to have an investing strategy that works best with your life. So you can do a percentage of your paycheck. You could just do $10 a week. You could also start a rainy day fund where every day that it rains outside, which has been pretty appropriate the last couple weeks here, $5 will automatically be invested. So other types of automations like that. And then from there, you can just track your progress. We really want it to be passive investing using strategies like dollar cost averaging to help basically smooth out the volatility of the cryptocurrency market over time. And that's really our product. You know, we just charge 3% on the conversions from fiat to crypto or vice versa. But, you know, any crypto to crypto transactions, no fees, there's no monthly fees, and there's no minimum balance that you need to have. So that's really the presentation on the product. What I really want to talk to you guys about is some of the roadblocks that we've run into, because I think there's a lot of people doing different applications and other blockchain projects here. So I figured it'd be kind of good to talk about the problems that we've run into. And the biggest one is just unclear regulations and how young the industry is. To actually convert US dollars to cryptocurrency, you need to do a lot. You need to do know your customer and anti-money laundering steps for each customer that you have. And with that, not only when they register, you also need to track them as they're making exchanges. On top of that, you also need to have a money transmitter license in every single state, which has their own regulations for that license. So it can be very complex, take up a year to get, and the initial cost for that are well over $100,000 plus the maintenance after that. So what we're choosing to do, and if anybody else is in this situation, I recommend it, is partnering with someone who has that licensing, who can provide you with those exchange services. So a few of the companies that we're talking to are Voyager Invest, Sendwire, Prime Trust, and Omise Go. They're all still fairly early, which I'd bring up the next point is how it's a young industry. The only one that actually, well, the only two that have services available right now are Sendwire and Prime Trust. Omise Go is still working on their fiat on-ramp, and Voyager should be launching sometime in December. But they all offer different levels of basically custodial services. Omise Go and Sendwire are more towards basically your user will have full custody, they'll have their keys, all that good stuff. Whereas Prime Trust holds on to all the keys, but also, just kind of rambling now with this, but also basically provides you more of a custodial solution. They give you a bigger suite of APIs at a higher cost. So basically, I wanted to put those options out there because I talked to a lot of other people in the space who have been in the same shoes as me. If you're interested in learning more about CoinClear or learning more about these different options that you have to provide basically fiat to crypto services and vice versa, which is a huge roadblock for the whole industry, let me know and I can make introductions to any of these companies. So yeah, that's a quick presentation. Does anybody have any questions? Yes. The native wallet? Which native wallet? iOS has a native wallet. Oh, I didn't realize that. I have an Android. They have a crypto wallet with that? Oh, the Cash app. The USD wallet? Google Pay and Apple Pay.
Well, in the wallet, you can put things like airplane tickets.
Well, the question is, are you going to integrate, just like you would integrate to US dollars, with Apple Pay and Google Pay?
Actually, that's not really my question. But the question is more of, if you're going to do this with wallet, are you creating an API or are you going to use the API with that wallet? And if so, are you going to allow people to do this? Like, for example, my thought is, here I am sitting here and I think, oh, I want to use that, and maybe I can use it through the Facebook page or Instagram page or somehow integrate it beyond downloading an app. So will it sit on the phone?
It will sit on the phone, yeah. So this is an app that you download to your phone.
But not an app, like a feature on the phone. So like your wallet is integrated with the phone, it's not an app.
There are currently no native wallets integrated with Android or iOS. All of them are third-party wallets that are usually either by an individual cryptocurrency or an exchange. So Coinbase, for example, supports 5 currencies in its wallet that can currently be exchanged. And I'm assuming you guys could work with Coinbase.
Yeah, so Coinbase actually has a pretty robust API that we've looked at. The problem is for doing sort of micro investments, as I call them, anything under 20 bucks, it's way too expensive. And they charge up to like 10% on a small transaction like that, which is unfortunate. If anybody knows anybody at Coinbase we can talk to about lowering that, that'd be great. But I want to make sure I answer your question, Miss. Okay, sounds good. We can talk after. Yes.
I've seen it done before with the whole regulatory concerns. I kind of want to hear your thoughts on it. But transferring to stablecoin, do you still run into the same regulatory issues?
Yeah, so the issue is you're talking about basically taking US dollars, transferring them to something like Tether. Yeah, so with that, you're still, anytime you're basically the intermediary for that transfer, when you're holding people's US dollars, you become a money transmitter, whether it's Tether, a stablecoin, or any other cryptocurrency. From what I understand, it's all viewed the same.
Yeah, so what you've explained so far, it sounds a bit like what Robinhood is trying to do with microtransaction investing, using that as a medium for investment. Even though they have only maybe 2 or 3 cryptocurrencies that you can invest in, how is it different, or does it integrate with?
Yeah, no, so that's a great question. So that's kind of a big trend that we're seeing, and what we really want to try to capitalize on is sort of robo and micro investors. So there's Acorns, Robinhood, Stash. There's a couple in the crypto industry as well. So Robinhood, unless they've added new features recently, don't have any types of automations, specifically with cryptocurrency as well. So that's really what we're trying to capitalize on, is that passive investing where you kind of just set what you want your automations to be, and sort of your habits will invest for you. Did that answer your question? Okay. Yes.
So I was talking about Abra, right? Because it starts like $5 or $10, but maximum of your main competitors and offers like 25 to 30 numbers. But I guess the difference between you and Abra would be the automation.
Yeah, exactly. And we've actually talked to Abra about partnering with them. They have an affiliate program basically where, you know, if they use us but have an Abra wallet and link with us, we get a percentage of what goes towards Abra. So we started talking with them, but it's probably not something we're going to pursue further until we have a functional app in the market and a large enough user base. Yes. No, it's interesting. I actually didn't know too much about that. You're saying basically Acorns because of, could you repeat that again? The, mm-hmm.
That weren't, continually automating the investments, and it upped it per type of investment. So getting more per 45K and less than my 120.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. I'd love to, if you have like the article or the report that talked about that, I'd love to learn more about it. But no, I mean, that's definitely something we plan on doing is, any startup, you have to kind of take in as much data as you can and base it off that, but it'd be nice to have a little bit of a head start. Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I can tell you just from what we've collected about 1,500 beta signups, and just from that, the segmentation is probably what you would have guessed. It's like males aged 18 to 35, but we're definitely working to get more information on that now. But I'd love to get that, please.
You guys based here in Austin?
Yeah, based here in Austin. It's actually 3 co-founders, 2 in Austin, and then 1 out in Seattle. Oh yeah, perfect. Any other questions? Cool, well, I'll be around. I work in Capital Factory if anybody else does, and you can reach me here, Steven@coinclear.io, if you want to learn more about the product, coinclear.io. Thanks guys. What was that? Yeah, so Coin Central. So outside of CoinClear, I'm also the executive editor of Coin Central. And basically, as I said earlier, we put out blockchain and cryptocurrency news, educational resources, and really, you know, we started about a year ago, and we've grown pretty quickly. We just were nominated as one of the top blockchain media sources at DevCon it's in Prague. I don't think we won. We were up against like Cointelegraph and the big guys, but it was pretty cool to see that happen. And really what we're trying to do is be the most objective source out there. We haven't taken any, we just put out our first paid like post on the site, but up until then we had no paid posts, no sponsorships or anything like that. Yeah, if anybody has any questions about that, or if you have, you know, interesting projects that you'd like me to know about, I'd love to hear it. I'm really in line with the mission of the Austin Blockchain Collective, really trying to get Austin put on the map for all the blockchain projects. Cool, thanks everybody. Thanks, Pete.
You guys are way better than Cointelegraph too. Good. Who is on next? It should be Miles on next. Miles is here at the back. Good. Come here. Where is your presentation? Did you? Ah. And is your laptop an Apple laptop? We stand a chance of it working. Do come here and we'll plug you in. Okay. All right. Do you want to plug yourself in? Is it same power? Is it different power?
Different power.
It would be. It's an Apple. Yeah.
Do you want me to?
Oh, you've got AirPlay on that?
I do have AirPlay.
Okay. Just should be able to AirPlay into ACE Austin City Limits. Yo, you're working.
Cool.
There you go. Off you go.
Hello, everybody. My name is Miles Snyder, and I'm the CEO of Aurora EOS. We're an Austin-based company that is an EOS block producer. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with EOS or familiar with that concept, but I'll tell you a little bit about it today. Please excuse my congestion. I've been fighting allergies all day. But so I wanted to give you guys sort of a short overview of what EOS is and why myself and many others are particularly excited about it for building decentralized applications. And then I can go a little bit into what we do at Aurora EOS and leave some time for questions there at the end. So EOS is a scalable blockchain operating system. So you could say that it's a smart contracts platform. It's a platform for dApps. Very similar to what Ethereum does and what some of the other platforms like Hashgraph and Dfinity and Tezos are attempting to do. But I think one of the things that distinguishes EOS is that it really is attempting to be sort of this full suite offering, which is why we really call it an operating system. And if you think about traditionally the way dApps get built and deployed, it's on an operating system. And the idea behind EOS is that instead of having iOS or Windows as your operating system, you actually have a fully decentralized operating system that lives on a blockchain. So One of the sort of most interesting things about EOS is its consensus model. So it's powered by a consensus model called delegated proof of stake, which is quite a bit different from some of the other stuff that's powering some of the better known blockchains like Bitcoin and Ethereum. So both Bitcoin and Ethereum currently operate on proof of work, which means that miners essentially accumulate really powerful computers and hardware, and they make as many attempts as possible to guess a hash, and if they get the hash correct, then they get to add a block to the blockchain. And what that ends up meaning is that it's really beneficial to economies of scale, and you have a lot of energy going towards these specific use cases. And then there's another sort of segment of consensus algorithms called proof of stake. And in a pure proof of stake system, it operates kind of like equity in a network, in the sense that if you own 10% of the network, then you add about 10% of the blocks to the blockchain over the course of a given time. So what EOS does is it takes the proof of stake model and changes it a little bit. So delegated proof of stake means that your stake doesn't determine how much of the block producing power you have, but rather how much voting power you have to decide who the network's validators are. So in Bitcoin and proof of work, the validators are the miners. In proof of stake, they're the people with the largest stake in the network. In delegated proof of stake, the miners are whichever entities are elected by the token holders to act as the network's validator set. So how does this work? Well, anyone who owns EOS can cast a vote on the blockchain. It's a 24/7 perpetual election. I call it, it's sort of like a liquid democracy, though it's not democracy because it's not one person, one vote, it's one token, one vote. But if you're an EOS token holder, you can either vote directly for block producers, or you can proxy or delegate your vote to someone who can do that on your behalf. And all of that can be done trustlessly. You don't have to hand over keys, anything like that. You can just say, I'm going to allow this person to direct the weight of my voting power. And if at any point you decide you don't want them to do that anymore, you can revoke that. And so all of these votes are cast and they're logged on chain, and the top block producers by total number of votes received are ranked. And so the top 21 at any given time in the rankings are the ones who actually add the blocks to the blockchain. So you sort of have these rounds that are called epochs, and 21 block producers produce blocks, add blocks to the chain, and then votes are tallied once again, and the top 21 during the next epoch are sort of given the opportunity to produce blocks in the next round. And so the actual entities that are producing blocks in those rounds, or the entities that are in the top 21, can change at any given time because token holders are able to vote block producers in or vote them out. And so we've actually seen a pretty significant amount of churn in the top 21 over time. Since the launch of the network, about 40 or 50 different companies have actually been in the top 21. So some companies sort of move in and out, and it changes a little bit. But I think in particular what's interesting about delegated proof of stake and what sort of differentiates it from proof of work is that with proof of work you have to basically have the capital to buy a lot of hardware, and if you can do that, if you can produce the hashes, then you get to add blocks to the blockchain. And so no one really can, if you're a Bitcoin user and there's a company out there like Bitmain or something like that that starts to accumulate a lot more of the hash power, well, you as a user can't really do that much about it. Maybe you're involved in a mining pool and you can point your miner elsewhere, but if one company starts to, if they can get the hardware, then they can produce a hash power and they can add blocks to the blockchain. In EOS, it's kind of different because what you have to do as a validator, as a block producer, is you have to actually go out there and earn the votes from the community. So instead of just being able to sort of buy your way in with hardware purchases, you actually have to go out there and prove value in order to get votes. So what we've seen on EOS is we've seen all of these different companies that are located all over the world offering all sorts of value-add services back to the network and back to the community completely free, because their business model is to get votes to be able to produce blocks, because they're paid by the blockchain if they do so. So we've seen people build, wallets and dApps and developer tools and educational materials and all these things that are given away to the community for free in order to get elected. And so it's a really interesting model because it actually incentivizes all of the validators in the network to bring as much value back into the community as possible instead of kind of, in proof of work or traditional proof of stake, what validators are adding is just pure security. They're just adding security to the network through proof of work or through validating blocks with proof of stake. With DPoS, not only are they adding security to the network, but in most cases, you're seeing block producers produce all sorts of other cool goods and services for the community. So this right here just sort of shows the relative distribution of some of the different algorithms. All of this is relative, and there's a lot more nuance here than this chart shows, in my opinion. I actually think proof of work is pretty interesting for a lot of reasons and useful for a network like Bitcoin. But with with something like EOS, you're going for a lot more scalability, and you want to take a different set of trade-offs. But interestingly enough, if you look at the distribution of block producing power among all of the top nodes on these different networks. This is for BitShares, but BitShares has the same delegated proof of stake as EOS. So you can see it's actually a more even distribution at any given time. Whereas with mining pools, you kind of have a power law distribution in terms of who controls block production power. So this is just a look at the top 21 block producers today. As you can see, that's the total number of votes that they've received, their rewards per day that are calculated in EOS, and you can see that they're just ranked by the number of votes that they receive. So, if there's a big whale on EOS who controls 10 million EOS, and one of these block producers does something that voter doesn't like, they could remove their vote from them, and all of a sudden that person's out of the top 21. And what it does is it sort of, the idea is that ultimately you put power back in the hands of the token holders, who are sort of collectively the owners of the network. So as I was mentioning before, EOS is kind of a blockchain operating system. So this little graph has sort of the three layers of the stack. And with, Ethereum was kind of sold as this decentralized computer. Ethereum is very sort of simple in what it does, especially right now. The Ethereum community is kind of trying to transition to Ethereum 2.0, which includes proof of stake and sharding and Casper and a lot of other improvements. But as it stands right now, Ethereum is kind of this super base layer decentralized computer. What EOS attempts to do is bring in all of these other features that allow you to get the full stack, such that you can have developers come on board, build apps, deploy them on this operating system, have interoperability among all these apps and all of the users, and get a lot more than what you get with something like Ethereum. So what are the features of EOS that are particularly exciting and make it really interesting for dApps? Well, I'm going to talk about a few of them. So the first is just general scalability. EOS is really built from the ground up to be highly scalable, and as it stands right now, it's the most scalable blockchain sort of with a live mainnet out there. And so scalability kind of comes down to two things, which is high throughput. EOS has passed 3,900 or more transactions per second. Low latency, so transactions are included in blocks almost immediately and confirmed pretty quickly. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to avoid some of the situations that we've seen plague both Ethereum and Bitcoin, where, for example, a dApp took off on Ethereum, CryptoKitties. I'm sure all of you guys have heard of this. Ethereum maxes out at about 15 transactions per second. As a result, the popularity of CryptoKitties essentially, made the chain come to a grinding halt. And with EOS, what the community is attempting to do is build something that's a lot more scalable, such that developers could deploy dApps and not have to worry about breaking the underlying chain. In addition, the delegated proof of stake model what it does is it actually incentivizes these block producers to scale up their own capacity as time goes on in order to add more capacity to the network. So with something like Bitcoin or something like Ethereum and proof of work, since the network has gone live, the performance of the network has not changed at all. Whereas with EOS, we've actually seen the network went live less than 6 months ago, and there's already been significant improvements with block producers working to optimize their hardware, optimize the handoff between block producers to reduce latency, make tweaks to the resource allocation algorithms that govern the blockchain and all of these things. So we've already seen a ton of improvements in EOS, and that's going to continue into the future because that's a big part of delegated proof of stake is saying to the the block producers, you get elected because you're sort of a steward of the network, and as long as you continue to build value for the network and build up the capacity, then you'll continue to earn votes, and if you don't, you'll get voted out. So I think probably the most interesting feature of EOS is that there is actually no individual transaction fees. So with any blockchain, what it really is it's a network that's a set of scarce resources that you have to figure out how to allocate. And so in Ethereum, what you do is you say, well, if you want access to the computation, then you just have to pay a fee. And if a bunch of people are lined up to get access to something because a bunch of people want to send a transaction, then you have two choices. You can either wait in line or you can pay a higher fee. So you can kind of bribe your way to the top if you really want to. But what that ends up leading to is that in times of, in times of congestion, fees get out of control. And depending on the use cases you're going for, that's not necessarily a terrible thing. Something like Bitcoin, which is really built to be this like settlement layer for really large transactions, maybe it can have really big transaction fees in the future. But if you're trying to build consumer-facing decentralized applications, there's a whole class of applications that would never work if you have users paying individual transaction fees. So things like blockchain-based games. You don't want a pop-up to come up every time you make a move in a game that says, do you want to pay 50 cents for gas for this transaction? Blockchain-based social networks. We saw someone build a Twitter clone on Ethereum called PeepEth. It was kind of cool and fun to use, but what we saw is that a bunch of people signed up and then no one really continued using it. Why? Because you had to pay for basically everything. Even when they started bundling transactions, you still had to pay to write those to the blockchain. And things like that just don't take off. There's two things that users really hate, and that's latency and fees. And EOS is attempting to get rid of both of them. So how does it do no transaction fees? Because I think one of the misunderstandings about EOS is that it's a free blockchain. No blockchain is actually free. So with Ethereum and Bitcoin, what you have is that inflation is used to pay miners. And then in addition to the inflation, so inflation, what I mean is that with each new block that's created, a certain amount of additional Ethereum or Ether or Bitcoin is created and paid to the miner that produced that block. In addition, those miners get paid all of the transaction fees included in that block. So it's sort of a dual model where miners are compensated through inflation and through transaction fees. What EOS does is it says, forget transaction fees, we're just going to pay the block producers through inflation. And because with delegated proof of stake, you actually have a smaller number of entities that are participating in the block production process, you can actually keep inflation pretty low. So currently it's at 1%, and that 1% annually is paying all of the block producers and incentivizing really good companies to come forward and try and be block producers. So it's a really interesting model, and what it does is that you could sort of make the case that all users are collectively paying sort of for their transactions pro rata through the inflation that they're eating. But I think the important thing is from a user perspective, you're not actually paying for each of those individual transactions, and that's going to help a lot of dApps get built that have different models or can do some of these things that might not be possible when you have transaction fees, especially high or unpredictable transaction fees. So another thing that EOS has is human readable account names. How many people here have sent a crypto transaction? Yes? So you guys all know how it feels when you triple check the address and then you're waiting forever for it to confirm and you don't know if it went through and you're scared that you didn't copy and paste it correctly. Well, EOS just gets rid of that. So instead of having your public key be your address, you actually have human readable account names. And then within these accounts, you have different key pairs. And it's a really unique system because, one, from a user perspective, a lot of the key management can be abstracted away by the wallet provider. So if I own EOS and I want to send it to Binance, I can send it to Binance Deposit. Or I can send it to my friend, and his account name is just his name. And that's sort of low-hanging fruit that when we think about trying to acquire users who are outside of this sort of crypto-native group of people that thus far have been the adopters, things like that are really important. Key management is not intuitive. People don't know what public and private keys are. They want to have similar experiences to what they've had on other web apps, and human readable account names are a really important part of that. But in addition, what you get with this system of account names is you get two things. You get account permissions and well, I'll go into the other one later, but you get these account permissions. So you have a human readable account name, and then within that account you have multiple key pairs, and you can do things like set up a key pair that's for one specific action only. So you can have a key pair that only allows you to vote. And so what that means is that you can keep your main set of keys that control the account in complete offline storage. You could have them on a crypto steel and kept in a bank vault somewhere, but you can still interact with the blockchain using a specific key that's only meant for voting or for staking or for interacting with one specific dApp. And that's pretty cool because it eliminates the trade-off that thus far has existed between having cold storage and being able to interact with the blockchain with a hot wallet. You can actually get the best of both worlds. And say that voting key gets stolen or compromised or whatever it may be, well, you can use a higher level permission to go in and change that one out. So it offers really, really unique features that can be used to sort of increase the security of the accounts, and it can be configured on the back end so that the end user gets a product that's much more similar in terms of feel and security to what they've been getting with traditional web apps. So you've also got things like delayed transactions. That's just another feature that's kind of interesting. You could say, if I move more than X number of EOS out of my account, the transaction should be delayed by 3 days before it's actually executed. And you can set up alerts on your account so you know that happened. And if it wasn't actually you who authorized it, well, you go and change out your keys and cancel the transaction. So there's a lot of different features that I think are going to allow EOS to gain a lot more user adoption than what we've seen thus far. And I'd encourage everyone to go download some of the EOS wallets. Download EOS Links. It's a mobile wallet where you can go use existing EOS dApps today. You're signing transactions with Touch ID. You're using human readable account names. It's an entirely different experience than what you've had thus far interacting with the blockchain. And then we've got a bunch of really exciting features that are coming in the future, which include multi-threading, which is like parallel execution. That'll just get you more scalability. Inter-blockchain communication, which means that you can have sort of side chains and sister chains, so blockchains that are built on the same software as the EOS mainnet, but operate as their own chain, but are completely interoperable with any other chain that's built on the same software. And then EOS storage is another one that's probably a little bit further out, but that kind of is one of the last remaining features that'll really allow EOS to be more like a full operating system. And the idea behind EOS storage is that EOS block producers will actually offer storage to the network, and you can stake your tokens in exchange for some storage, and it'll be, the block producers will be the ones who actually host the files using IPFS. And so as a developer, you'll be able to go onto EOS, you'll have access to storage, you'll have access to bandwidth, you'll have access to all of the other features of the EOS blockchain and all of the users of the EOS blockchain, because once you have an account on EOS, you can use any dApp that's on the platform. So, in my opinion, EOS is going to be the platform that gains the most adoption with some of the use cases that I consider to be sort of the exciting use cases for blockchain technology that are sort of in the near term. I think there's probably going to be a lot of stuff in the future that we can't really imagine yet, but things like gaming, things like non-fungible tokens, decentralized exchanges, decentralized social networks, all of those things are really possible in a way that they haven't been possible before, either because of the the throughput or the latency or the no transaction fees. With decentralized exchanges, you can actually build a fully on-chain order book using EOS because we've got half-second block times and enough capacity to handle something like that. Whereas if you do it on other networks, you have to take a lot of stuff off-chain. Stablecoins, I think, will be really big on EOS because there's going to be so many dApps that can integrate them. And I also think in the future, security tokens and tokenized assets will really benefit from some of those account features that I mentioned before that'll make it a lot more friendly for enterprises that are wanting to build on the blockchain. So we can look at right now and see, what kind of traction has EOS gained in the last 6 months since the mainnet went live. Well, if you look at the, the daily active users or even the volume on some of the top dApps on EOS, you'll see that it's actually quite a bit higher than, EOS's next biggest competitor, which is Ethereum. And Ethereum's been around for several years. And I think what this really speaks to is the usability of EOS. There's been a lot of people in the crypto community who have sort of questioned these numbers, or they've said, this transaction volume has been faked or whatever it may be. There's no real way to prove this, but I would encourage, if anyone's skeptical of these numbers, just go out there and play with some EOS dApps, download one of the mobile wallets, go use one of the dApps from your mobile phone, and you'll see that the levels of usability are much different than what you're used to, and you'll see why adoption like this could happen in such a short time. So finally, yeah, my company, we are a block producer candidate. We're called Aurora EOS, and we're based here in Austin. And our mission is really around education. So, different block producers have sort of come to specialize in different verticals. Some block producers are building developer tools. Some are building infrastructure like wallets and block explorers, things like that. We really saw a need for better education within the EOS community, especially. Hello, hello. Okay. So yeah, because EOS is a system of on-chain governance, it's really important that the token holders, the people who are participating in governance, are doing so in an informed way, and that's really what we've tasked ourselves with doing. So if you want to learn more, you can visit our website, auroraeos.com. All our contact information is on there. Please feel free to reach out. And yeah, anyone have any questions? All right, cool.
So, Miles, probably in 2 minutes, I don't know if you can answer this. So you had a great blog post last week on ECAF and what you thought about that. And I guess there's another one forthcoming, but
It'll be released tomorrow.
any short comments before the release tomorrow?
Yeah, this is probably for the people who are like, you clearly. Yeah, that's hard in 2 minutes. Essentially, we've been talking a lot about the governance issues on EOS, and in particular, there's been a conversation around the topic of arbitration, which was an idea that was introduced to the EOS community with the EOS white paper, and sort of built into the network from day one. This idea that you could have sort of arbitrators who exist within the community that can help resolve disputes between users. And in my opinion, that's actually a really useful thing if it's structured as a service that's built on top of the blockchain. So you could have it structured as a dApp, you could have it structured as a third-party service, but all of these things should be opt-in for users. There's another group of people in the EOS community who actually think that arbitration should be part of the base layer protocol of EOS. Meaning that sort of any dispute that happens on the blockchain can find its way back to some arbitration party that can help resolve that dispute. That's a sort of gross oversimplification of it. If you're interested in really diving deeper, we're releasing a blog post on this tomorrow morning. But my opinion is that base layer arbitration is a huge mistake for EOS. I think it absolutely destroys the ability for EOS to have any form of social scalability. And at Aurora, we're working hard to remove that system completely. No, we're not in the top 21. So the network pays the top 21 a certain percentage of inflation, and then compensates a bunch of standby block producers who are sort of vying for those top positions. So that's where we are. So I mean, I actually would disagree that there's tons of collusion inside the network. I think there's if you sort of believe the stories that have been written in certain crypto media publications, it's kind of been blown out of proportion. I mean, there was very little evidence brought forth about any of that. That being said, it's entirely possible that stuff is happening, and like at the end of the day, you can't prevent people from vote buying or from trying to you pat my back, I'll pat yours. But what you want to do is you want to create a network that is sort of resilient to that kind of thing being effective or doing any damage, because like you can't prevent vote buying. It's just going to push those deals. Yeah. So in my opinion, what needs to happen for that is two things. You need more voter participation, and you need more voter education. So right now, like the allegations that were put forth were basically that like one of these exchanges was able to have a huge say over who gets to be a block producer because they're voting with users' funds. Right now, there's only a small percentage of EOS token holders actually voting, and thus that exchange that holds a lot of funds has a hugely outsized influence in terms of governance. However, if you had everyone voting or a large percentage of people voting, their influence shrinks significantly. And so what you want is to sort of build up the utility of the blockchain, actually have people building things on top of it, and those parties have a long-term vested interest in EOS being a stable, secure network and not having things like collusion. So what we're seeing now is dApps like EOS Bet Dice as an example. This is a hugely profitable dApp that's built on top of EOS. They've accumulated a huge EOS stake, and they're voting with that stake. They're not voting for the block producers that have been accused of collusion. Why? Because collusion is bad for the network and thus bad for their business. That's the first of a ton of dApps that are going to get built on EOS. So dApps, enterprises, crypto hedge funds, other parties that have long-term vested interest in EOS are going to start to actually begin participating in governance, and they're going to make that connection that having an honest validator set is good for their investment, good for the health of their business, and that's when we're going to get better governance. But it's a work in progress. So, my focus right now is on the EOS mainnet. That's the one I'm most interested in. I was just at a conference where Douglas Horn was speaking, and I think they're doing a lot of interesting stuff. If I had to be frankly honest, I think what's going to happen with Talos is that they're going to experiment with a lot of different models, and if any of that seems to really be working, the mainnet will probably incorporate that. Yeah, the Litecoin or like the minor leagues of EOS kind of. But I do think that whether it's Talos or another chain in the future could adopt the EOS.io software, make some tweaks to it, experiment with different stuff, and actually be competitive with the mainnet. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Miles. I think there'll be maybe questions after this. So, are you hanging around for a bit?
I have to take off in.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll get you back to talk more about. Are you going to share your slides with us?
Yeah. Are you going to put them online?
Yeah.
All right, I'll email them too.
Great. Thank you.
Cool.
Okay, we're running a bit behind, but that's not a big problem. Is Mark here? Great. Super. I'm going to get you up to. Okay. Play from start.
I actually have seen one. They're pretty nifty.
Okay, I need to pull this. Okay. Okay, what's going on here? Come on, you can do it. Yeah, it's done it. Good. Okay. Window, view, slideshow from start. Good. You okay? Good. Yeah, good. There you go. Over to you.
All right. Thanks, Pete. So my name's Mark. I'm on the marketing and events team at SkyCoin. Has anyone heard of the project before? A couple people in the back. Okay. So I'm going to give a 101, talk about what we've been doing so far and what's coming up in the future. We'll start with some history. So the project has been around for quite a while, in development for over 7 years, and it's been publicly traded for about 2 years. We've had a few co-founders. One of them was an early dev on Bitcoin. He was doing auditing and bug fixing back in the day. His name is Brandon. And we had another co-founder named Hao-Woo Chen. He was an early developer on Ethereum. He actually wrote our first white paper. So the project has had some legs, as I mentioned, and we just started to do marketing this year. So we finally have some cool things coming down the pipe, and that's why we wanted to start getting the word out to everybody. So what is SkyCoin trying to do? We're really trying to build a whole ecosystem. So if I give an example from a company that everybody knows, Apple, right? They made the iPhone, and then they built iTunes, right? So you can listen to music on your phone. They have the AirPods, so you can connect those to your phone, listen to music while you're going running. They have the App Store. So they built a whole ecosystem around the phone, and SkyCoin's trying to do the same thing, but with blockchain. So everything up here is some main components of our ecosystem. I'm going to touch upon them on the upcoming slides. But just to start with the top left, the actual currency itself, we have a blockchain built from the ground up. So it's not a fork of Bitcoin or ERC20. We have our own blockchain. It's quite fast in terms of transactions. They're about instantaneous in about 2 or 3 seconds, and they're also free. So we do that with a parallel currency that you are awarded just like a dividend from holding SkyCoin. So that's how we get free transactions. So the first part of our ecosystem I'll touch upon is Skywire. So this is a decentralized internet, so a peer-to-peer mesh network that we're building out. So mesh networks aren't new, right? They've been around for a while, and they've had varying degrees of success, but I think one of the reasons why they haven't been more widespread is there's no incentive to actually run a node. No financial incentive, right? It's just volunteers. So that's why with Skywire, we provide a financial incentive for sharing your bandwidth with your neighbors. So anyone who's providing services or bandwidth on our network gets paid in SkyCoin. And anyone who's consuming resources on our network pays in SkyCoin. So how does that work? That's where this beautiful piece of machinery comes into play. This is a Sky Miner. Essentially, it's a personal cloud, and it's made up of computer boards. We have Orange Pis here. They're just single board computers, but Raspberry Pis and any single board computer will work. Each board can process 100 megabits of bandwidth per second. So there's 8 boards here. It's pretty heavy. 8 boards here, so this can almost process 1 gigabit of data per second right here. There's also a router and a power supply that makes up the box. And the idea is you have one of these in your living room, and then you have an antenna on your roof. And I don't have one with me, but we have antennas that have been prototyped. And there'll be an antenna on your roof, and we have 2 different antennas. One will be a point-to-point line-of-sight antenna that'll go around 5 to 10 miles. And there'll be a secondary antenna which will broadcast Wi-Fi to your neighbors, probably a half mile to a mile radius. And if they connect to your Wi-Fi, they'll pay you in SkyCoin to do that. So the ultimate goal is to topple Comcast and get rid of them, right? But that's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a while. So where we are right now, we're in the testnet phase. So there is each board here is considered a node, and there are 9,000 nodes on our network in the last 4 or 5 months, and that's in over 40 countries. So right now in testnet, what that means is it still runs over the legacy internet. So you basically plug this in, and it acts as a VPN. So very similar to Tor. And once the antennas are done, and I think they should be ready to go in about 3 months or so, once the antennas are done, then the actual mesh net will start to be built out. And that's when you'll be able to connect miner to miner to miner and actually get rewarded or paid by people accessing your connection. So yeah, this slide, is there a question?
What do they cost?
Yeah, so you can buy one from us. They're around $500, or you can build one yourself. It's the same price. So these boards are around $40 or $50 each. You can buy them on Amazon or AliExpress or eBay. They're just Orange Pis. And then the router is pretty cheap. It's around $30. So $500, give or take, for that. But that processes a total of 800 megabits per second, right? 100 megabits times 8 boards. You don't have to have 8 boards. You can just have one board that could do 100 megabits per second. So that would be around $40. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so from the security standpoint, so you're worried about what exactly? Yeah, so Skywire is fully encrypted end to end. So there's really two types of nodes on the network, right? There'll be relay nodes, and they'll just be passing the data back and back. So it'll be just a point, hop to hop to hop. You won't actually know what's going through your node, right? So you're not liable from that perspective. I think your concern might be with an exit node. So if you're actually plugged into your existing internet and then providing that as a launching point for the mesh, you're able to remove any kind of content that you don't want on your node. So if you say, I don't want any adult content to be filtered through my Skywire node, you can ban certain websites or certain types of content. Correct. So yes. So yeah. So the end goal is to replace Comcast over time. Yeah. So it's all software built by our developers, and it's fully end-to-end encrypted. I'm not a dev. I'm just a marketing guy. But if you have specific questions, then I'll be able to get those to the right people on our team to answer them. Yes. No, but maybe in the future. I mean, yeah. So our co-founder Brandon, he has a lot of big ideas. He's a big thinker. He wants to do cell phones and laptops and stuff like that in the future. So this is really just the beginning, the Skywire aspect. The second piece of our ecosystem is fiber. So this is our platform where you can launch your own project on top of. So similar to EOS, Miles was talking about that, or Ethereum. It's our version of ERC-20. But there's a few main differentiators between us and someone like Ethereum. The first is we give every project their own blockchain. So with Ethereum, right, you have everybody competing for transactions. If there's a big ICO over there, the whole network can shut down. With Fiber, that's not an issue. So each blockchain is independent. So what happens on blockchain A has no impact on blockchain B unless you want to link them together. So I think that's a really cool feature of the platform. And then also we have our own programming language. So this is called CX. So this is an alpha stage right now. CX is. It's based on Golang. So any dev that is comfortable with Golang or Python will be able to code in CX. It's designed to be Turing complete, full functionality. This is an alpha stage right now. So there's a lot of bugs. We're working through all the kinks on that. And you can see we have a couple different prototype games that some of our community members have built out, Pac-Man and Flappy Bird. But if you're a developer and you're interested in Skycoin or CX and programming, just let me know. I can put you in contact with our team. There are bounties and rewards for people who are looking to work on our network here. And actually, we just came out with an instruction manual on how to use CX. That's on our GitHub. It's 60 or 70 pages. And we're going to be partnering with some universities. We're trying to get this in the hands of as many people as possible over the next year or two. Yes. And then last slide here, I'm going to talk just a little bit about some of our other hardware projects. I mentioned the SkyMiner that powers our mesh network. In the top right, we have plug-and-play nodes. So this is how we think we're really going to reach some adoption, right? I think the folks in this room might be more technical, so they could probably do what I did and assemble the SkyMiner and do some networking. But to really get this in the hands of as many people as possible, we need to be able to just give it to them and have them plug it in and use it. So that's where the plug-and-play nodes come into play. This is a prototype that we're working on for that. I mentioned the antennas earlier. This is a picture of one of the prototypes. should be done in 2 or 3 months. The price point for this is going to be around $100. And we want this, the antennas, the miners, we want the DIY community to get involved here. So you don't need to buy any of this stuff from us. We have a large base of people, like 500 or 600 people who have built their own SkyMiner, people who are building antennas right now. We have a forum and 24/7 tech support on Telegram. So we realize this is going to be a community effort. So the antennas are going to be no different from the actual SkyMiner in that sense. And then finally, on the bottom right, we do have a hardware wallet which is coming out. So this is our version of the Ledger wallet or the Trezor. You'll be able to store SkyCoin, any of the coins that have launched on Fiber. There's actually been probably like 15 or 20 coins that have actually launched on Fiber so far. And there's a bunch more in the pipeline for 2019 that haven't been made public yet. But you'll be able to store those coins and probably the top 50 or top 100 other crypto. What's cool about the hardware wallet with us is the price point. I think it'll be around $20. So if you buy a Nano or a Trezor, it could be $100 or $200. We're basically going to give these away just to expand our ecosystem and show what SkyCoin's capable of. I don't think that's me. That's all I had. So there's a couple big things coming up with SkyCoin. Yes, so I'll go ahead and answer questions. No, I'm good.
Is there some sort of FCC exemption for your localized transmission?
No, so it runs over 2.5 and 5 gigahertz. So the same thing as baby monitors or walkie-talkies. So there's really nothing that like a government could do in terms of shutting this down, and short of going door to door and literally taking the antenna off your roof.
And have you guys done any studies like for City of Austin? What would it take to provide service for City of Austin?
Yeah, so the antennas, there'll be 2 types, right? There'll be a line of sight that can go 5 to 10 miles, and then the shorter antenna that'll broadcast Wi-Fi. I think that like 100 probably would cover a City of Austin. But the use case for this, you know, Austin's different, right? We have Google Fiber here. We have multiple providers, and it's fairly cheap. If you think in other countries that don't have that kind of infrastructure, the SkyMiner could be really helpful. So if you look at, we're working with a couple NGOs right now in Africa, right? They don't have the infrastructure built out in actual fiber cables underground, and they have quite a few people who are spending 20, 30, 40% of their salary on mobile data, right? So something that is really simple, that even is 50 kilobytes, 100 kilobytes, that could just send text messages and you can browse the internet, but just like ham radio type stuff could be beneficial in countries or continents like Africa, also in China. That's where a bunch of our developers are, right? They censor Google, they censor Facebook. Well, if you have a SkyMiner, it's fully encrypted. There's a VPN, so you're able to access websites that the government would normally block. So the use cases are in first world in Austin, but also in developing countries as well.
How dense would the modules or the nodes be for disinfectant?
Well, right now, if you just had one, it would work as a VPN for yourself. But for the actual mesh thing you're asking about, the actual mesh network, TBD, right? We don't have the antennas finalized yet. But again, 5 to 10 miles should be the range if you're connecting one miner to the next miner with line of sight. And then for broadcasting your Wi-Fi, about a half mile to a mile is what we're looking at now. So, I think for a city like Austin, if you place them strategically, like downtown, it may only be 10 or 15 miners that could cover downtown. But if you're looking at, if you kind of get out to farther areas, you'll definitely need some more. Yes. For fiber? Yeah. I can find that out for you. That's a good question. I have been in Austin for about 6 years. Yeah. So I was just in the community, just on Telegram. And over the summer, the guy who was running the marketing team asked if anyone was interested in joining. And then I applied, and here we are. So yeah, I've been traveling. I've been doing events. The team was just in Malta at Malta Blockchain Summit, beginning of November. We were at TechCrunch Disrupt in San Francisco in September. We've been in Vegas. We've been at a lot of places in the last year, just trying to get the word out. I have not. I know. Have you? Okay. He's eccentric for sure, but he's one of the guys that you can tell his brain is thinking faster than he can get the words out. And like sometimes he gets too excited and he like can't even say what he wants to say, but his brain's moving so fast. But yeah, I think he's a great leader.
One last question.
Yes.
Are you doing blockchain above or below the regular internet packet level of UDP or whatever? I forgot the name of the layer, number of it.
Yeah, so Skywire doesn't even need blockchain to run. It's separate. And it's integrated back with blockchain in terms of the payment, in terms of the actual payments. So those will be settled off-chain in that parallel currency that I was talking about earlier that you receive for free when you get Skycoin. And you'll be able to convert that currency back into Skycoin.
Civil liberty network efforts going on in Austin that we could probably participate in.
Well, that sounds great. We should connect. Perfect. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I hope everyone stays around and isn't so flabbergasted by everything that's happened before, because I've got a little presentation now. And if you want to, you can all just go down to the bar, and I'll see you down there. But let's try and get this running. Okay. Great, it's working. Super. Thanks for staying. So, quick show of hands. So this presentation is about blockchain and the future of food. Who here in the audience has heard of food? Anyone has any direct contact with food? About half of you. Good, super. We're going to carry on quickly now. So, blockchain and food supply chains is something that is really happening. It's happening now. This is a lot of what I'm going to talk about is real life, early live production applications of blockchain. When I'm not involved with Austin Blockchain Collective, I'm a co-founder of this company. We focus on blockchain in supply chain applications. And these slides will be available afterwards, so you can read through the whole of the spiel here. I'm not going to spend any real time tonight on it. But I just co-wrote a book, and it's called Blockchain and the Future of Food. So you can think of tonight as me plugging my book. I co-wrote it with a couple of authors. It's out on our website today. It'll be on Amazon and iBooks tomorrow. I'm reliably informed. It kind of covers what the food industry is about, how its supply chains work, how blockchain's being used, and some of the notable projects. And some of the presentation tonight comes from the book, and there's a little bit which is sort of exclusive for tonight as well. So kind of jump into it. There's something we actually begin the book talking about the food industry's perfect storm. Lots of things happening in the world of food, which is exciting, stroke frightening, stroke perplexing. The world's population is growing. It's going to grow, some people think, to about 10 billion by 2050, and they're going to require food, maybe about 50% more food. The trouble is that some other people are saying, and this is only just one figure, by 2050, 95% of the world's land that can be used for growing food will be shot to death due to climate change, due to urbanization, many things, but it's not good news. It's also true to say that we waste a lot of food. Current estimates say we waste about 30% of the food that we produce. So walk into a supermarket, buy 3 bags of food, walk out, throw 1 bag immediately in the trash. That's the analogy. There are some sort of big picture demographic changes happening with regard to how food, what the demand for food is. Poorer countries are, in general, getting richer. The people there are moving to different kinds of foods, away from grains to meats and vegetables. We already know that the Western world consumers certainly consume a lot of meat and vegetables, and they're becoming very much more demanding in what they eat. They want more transparency about what they're eating. They want to know things about their food, which maybe a few years ago they didn't particularly care about. Sustainability, how the food was produced, who was involved in producing the food, what is in the food. They definitely want fresher food in general. They want better food. They want more choice. The number of Muslims in the world is increasing. They want halal food. There's a lot of demand for vegan and organic food, and different types of food. So the kind of food dynamic is changing a lot. So the industry really has to adapt and really comply with what the consumers want. Food safety is unfortunately becoming a real issue in the world of food and the supply of food, and it's one in which it's getting a lot more visibility in the last few years. The Centers for Disease Control in the US reckon for about the last 10-12 years there have been about three each year E. coli outbreaks in leafy greens, as they call them, things like lettuce, in multi-states, quite big ones. But this year there was a real whopper of an outbreak. It happened in mid-year. Did people here hear about the big E. coli outbreak so it affected romaine lettuce? It caused a couple of hundred people to feel very ill. It affected 36 states. About 100 people went to hospital. 95 came back. Killed 5 people. The outbreak. The FDA reckon that the outbreak was in the Yuma area of Arizona. Most of the leafy greens in the country is grown in California, Arizona, bit in Florida. This happened, they think this happened in Arizona, pretty sure of it, but not just in one farm. It happened in a number of farms, and they reckon what happened was a common irrigation channel to it, a stream, ran past a cattle farm, and cattle farms are full of E. coli, and cow manure got into the stream, which got into the irrigation, which affected a number of the farms. And it was really just impossible for the authorities to really act fast enough to shut it down. They kind of had to let it work through the system. But it really was a kind of a bit of an eye-opener or a defining moment for the FDA and the regulators, because at the beginning of this month, the FDA wrote a memo essentially to the leafy greens producers here in the States, and they said the FDA strongly encourages you to get your act together. And interestingly, within their statement, this comes from the memo which they sent out, they talked about traceability best practices and state-of-the-art technology. Now, I think we can probably all understand what that might mean. So very timely that they're saying this, and very timely as it relates to some of the activities going on with some of the big projects, which we'll get to later. But this has become a big area of concern and action at government regulatory level, state regulatory level, and the big organizations representing producers. Even without food safety, the world of the food supply chain is extremely dynamic and changing. And we're kind of, here in Austin, we're kind of almost at the center of some of the changes. Competition is increasing because the likes of Amazon, who a couple of years ago were not really into the food business, certainly are now. They've opened a number of their own stores. They're opening a lot more. They acquired Whole Foods. At the same time, Walmart has done a number of initiatives on their side to move into higher end food. We can all see the sort of changing landscape with restaurants and the food service channel. We see that here almost every day here in Austin, with new types of restaurant cropping up, new kind of models. Food trucks we know and love here in Austin. Certainly home meal kits have really taken off in the industry, as have delivery services. So the kind of supply chain response to these dynamics has really changed a lot of aspects of supply chains in the food industry. As that has happened, the players in the food supply chain, everyone from the growers to companies which process food, which distribute food, which transport food, and sell food, however, and by a number of different mechanisms, suddenly find themselves in a very changing world. They need to get a lot of data on what's happening out there, what their customers are doing, what they want. They need to pull in that information and analyze it. They're certainly applying analytics to it. They're beginning to apply AI to it. They need to react very quickly to things that go on, whether that be a food scare in terms of stopping and doing a recall, or even changing weather conditions, which might mean that a particular food in an area of the country is suddenly in demand. So it's a very dynamic, sort of real-time industry. And at the same time, the regulators, as I mentioned earlier, are getting far more involved in the world of food supply chains. In fact, one indicator of that is Walmart's head of food safety, who's quite a prominent person, Frank Yanis. He is leaving Walmart to join the FDA in the new year, and he is essentially going to be the food safety czar at the FDA. He's been involved a lot with blockchain, and so it's very interesting what the FDA are saying about what they want the industry to be doing. Talk a little bit, as we have done in the book, about how blockchain is being used in supply chains. Not going to delve too much into these, but it's obviously being used for visibility, tracking of products through a supply chain from the farm, from the producer, right through to the plate, to the fork. If you can track something, you can trace it, and you want to trace it more and more with far more accuracy and far more quickly, especially if you're doing a product recall. You need to know where that bad product came from. Right now within the industry, even with the regulation, it follows this model of kind of one up, one down. So if you're a, let's say a company in the middle of a supply chain who is ripening fruit to make it pleasurable for people at Whole Foods to buy, you need to know who sent you the fruit and where you're sending the fruit to. You don't need to know anything else. So right now, actually tracing a product right through the supply chain is very difficult because you've got to tap into a number of different sources. So blockchains being looked at as a shared service which can rapidly make that kind of process work. Transparency, what's in my food, that's important both from the point of view of consumers wanting to know more about the food they're eating, certainly in terms of how it was produced, what is in the food, how it got to them. That kind of transparency is becoming it's becoming not least a marketing tool for retailers. Payments is very important in this world. We all know everyone needs to be paid. In the world of food supply chains, that can be a tortuous task, especially if you are a provider of a crop in Africa and having to deal with many different parties simply to get your goods to a market. It's a process that's frankly full of middlemen and not entirely honest middlemen. So anything you can do to actually allow people along the chain to be paid and paid in a fair way and rapidly is a good thing. Analytics, we chatted about determining supply chain pain points and improving efficiency. Identity is an interesting one. With supply chains, they involve a lot of different people in often different countries. There's got to be trust in the system. Players in the system have got to know who the other players are and trust that they know. And also, they've got to know what's in a product with an amount of guarantee. This comes back to transparency as well. For instance, the world is very fond of Italian extra virgin olive oil, and a lot of it is consumed, and probably about 80% of it is fake. So that's a little bit of a problem for suppliers who are in the business of producing real, authentic Italian extra virgin olive oil. So. In the book, we go through quite a few of we list quite a few of the vendors and providers in the space. We've got a few of these in the next few slides, which we'll delve into. But just some quick names out there. IBM is a very big player in this market. Going to cover them in a bit. Oracle, we're not really covering, but they are a very big supply chain player. They're obviously very big here in Austin. They've rolled out some applications running on their blockchain service related to supply chain and related to food supply chains. So going to be interesting to follow them. Provenance is an English company. We've got a slide on them. Viant is a generalized supply chain track trace product which is doing some work in the food space. They are a offshoot of Consensus, the Ethereum Borg, if you like. Couple of other companies which you may not be familiar with. They're from Switzerland. Food Guardians is a company which is kind of a sister company of SkyCell, who are in the pharmaceutical supply chain business, providing containers which are sealed and of which they throw off various data about the contents of the containers in terms of getting pharmaceutical drugs from A to B in a way that's guaranteed to work. They've spun off a sister company looking at the food supply chain. ScanTrust is another company out of Switzerland but working in Asia Pacific and Latin America in the wholesale coffee business. Just introduced. They're a company which has got both sort of ID sensors, and they've added a blockchain option to that, actually running on Hyperledger Sawtooth. So there are just a few of the names out there. There's probably about 20, 30 companies at least. right now involved in this world of the food blockchain supply chains. So going to quickly just go through a few of them a little bit. Just going to take a quick sip of water. So this is one you can potentially all participate in. Cargill have a brand of turkeys which they're selling this year, Honeysuckle White. In fact, they've been selling it for a while, but last year they introduced a pilot here in Texas only, of track and trace for turkeys sold in stores. The idea is that there's a code on the turkey. You go to either a website or a mobile app. You type in the code, and it tells you a lot of things about the turkey, where it came from, how it got to you, what's in it, what the farming methods were used. I don't think it tells you the name of the turkey while it was living, but it might do. This pilot last year was really successful, and so for this year they've expanded it. They've tripled the number of turkeys involved. They've expanded it to a lot more states. They put a limited number out via Amazon. So that's a really good sort of example of something close to home where you can, go to your local supermarket, get a Honeysuckle White turkey and track and trace it. And it worked on a blockchain. I don't know, this was a Cargill built blockchain. I don't know what technology they use. Does anyone know? I don't know. I know Cargill are experimenting with Hyperledger Sawtooth, but it may not be that at all, so who knows. But it's an interesting one to try out if you want to. Very similar what Cargill are doing with their pilot to a company out of the UK, and what they've been doing for a couple of years now. Startup company, but pretty successful one called Provenance. They've actually got a couple of hundred customers now, mostly in the UK. It's a mixture of a track trace product with essentially kind of a mini blogging service, so that the providers of produce and the parties along the route can actually sort of put up their own information on the service about who they are, what their values are, how food is produced or how food is processed. They can add to that information certifications from validated certifiers, and those validations can be cryptographically signed for authenticity. So you can do a mixture of kind of track, trace, and following a product along its supply chain. Their kind of tagline is every product tells a story, and that's kind of where they're coming from. They work a lot in the food business and a bit in the apparel business as well. Got a couple of big customers in the UK, including the Co-op, which is a large kind of socially owned enterprise. Has been around forever. I used to shop there as a kid. But they have some customers here in the States too, including a collective of farmers in Arkansas who are using their service for poultry and supplying it mainly to California, in the San Francisco area. And again, that what they do is provide a way through the sort of QR codes. You can go along, scan a code, find out a lot about the product that you are buying. Certainly a lot of what companies like Provenance and what Cargill are doing, they're doing this because they realize consumers want to know more and will make a buying decision based on that. Maybe they'll pay more too. So it's an interesting business model. Interestingly, Provenance, among a lot of the blockchain, most of the blockchain companies that I know of in this space are adopting some kind of private model blockchain. Provenance are huge fans of using public Ethereum. Whether they'll use that forever, I'm not sure, but they're definite sort of advocates of public blockchain networks, and they've been an Ethereum player pretty much since the word Ethereum was mentioned. So another company to follow. Couple of quick examples. This is a restaurant chain called Bloomin' Brands. They've got a number of different restaurant brands, including Fleming's Steakhouse. I think there's one here in town. They operate a lot of restaurants. They have been working with a Dallas-based supply chain management software provider called One Network Enterprises. One Network has been around for a few years with a software as a service based supply chain management, track, trace, inventory control system. They are actually now in the process of adding a blockchain option to it, which Bloomin' Brands are using. They're piloting it specifically for things like custody, where is product now, transparency, providing greater information to their management, and managing their food recalls. So again, as a company in the restaurant business, the last thing they want to be is the next Chipotle, which was a bit of a disaster in a couple of years ago in terms of not really getting a handle on their supply chain. So it'll be interesting to see how that experiment rolls out. One quick example of a company which you may not know of called Bex 360. They're out of Colorado. They've got an interesting business, an interesting product. It's what they call they've developed what they call the Coinstar for coffee. They produce this is sort of a pretty bad picture of one there, sat on a farm in, I think it's somewhere in Uganda. They're working in Uganda, I think in Africa, and I think in South America now. They combine a few technologies so that what happens here is a coffee farmer comes along with their coffee berries. They pour the coffee berries actually into the machine, like you will with a Coinstar. The machine analyzes the coffee berries using machine assisted vision, figures out the quality of those cherries, and says to the farmer, I am going to pay you this amount for this haul. Do you want the deal? And if the farmer says yes, they get paid pretty much immediately using the Stellar cryptocurrency. And if that happens, if the farmer accepts it, there's a sort of somewhat manual, somewhat automated method to pull the coffee out of there and get it shipped off to coffee producers. There's a track and trace overlay they're putting in right now on top of that to track it along the way. Interestingly, this company has got already some quite sort of large, early stage but large contracts with some quite big coffee producers who are selling through retail in places like Whole Foods and Blue Bottle. So another company to watch. And I guess no presentation about food and supply chain is complete without mentioning Walmart and IBM. A couple of years ago, Walmart were involved in a couple of pilots along with IBM. They were pretty well We're back. Good. Yeah, a couple of years ago they were involved in a couple of pilots, mangoes here in the US, pork in China. They had some good results working with IBM's blockchain, which is based on Hyperledger Fabric. They actually, earlier this year, they rolled out that service. IBM took that pilot and productize it into something called IBM Food Trust, which they began to sell to a number of people. Walmart began using it for probably 30 or 40 different products. Interestingly, they also, as well as using the product themselves, they formed a consortium including companies who were their rivals, like Kroger, and involving companies in their supply chain, like Tyson Foods and Driscoll's. I think one of the points of doing this consortium model is for Walmart to say it is not just us, it is an industry here. And if you as a producer use this system, which by the way, we don't own this system, IBM owns this system, they will sell it to you. But if you use it, you're not locked into us, you've actually got a number of options. So I think that was a clever move by them, especially given some of their past missteps. So they've been using the system for a few months in a number of different products. As a result, in part of the Remain lettuce scare earlier this year, and the FDA coming along and mandating state-of-the-art technology, they have actually said to their suppliers, I don't think they've actually said the word "we insist," but they've made it pretty obvious they want their suppliers of leafy greens to be using the IBM Food Trust Network, which, again, IBM are the providers of that. It's relatively inexpensive to use because it really, for farmers, for producers, it's really just an app or a website access on a mobile device. So IBM's obviously benefited from their relationship with Walmart. Walmart's benefited from working with a big technology provider from IBM. They've all benefited or will do, I think, from the FDA's mandate, or strong encouragement. Interestingly, Carrefour, who are a big international grocer, French-based, they built their own blockchain-based track trace system about a year ago, used it to track something like 1 million chickens through their system and expanded it into some other commodities, and they have decided to stop their own blockchain and use the IBM service. Also, interestingly, IBM are expanding their platform beyond just food safety into it providing sort of operational efficiency, so the things you need to run a blockchain, and that's pretty, not a bad move for IBM to make, given they're into a bundle of other technologies like IoT and AI. So I'll leave you with that last example. You can contact me here. Got room for probably time for 5-10 minutes of questions if you got them, and buy my book. Carry on. Sure.
Yeah. So with priorities that goes bad, putting up everything on the blockchain in terms of inventory tracking, is there any current use or potential future use of using a predictive data analytics platform that also automates the purchase of inventory?
Yeah, and that's beginning to that kind of technology is already being used in, if you like, mainstream supply chain management systems. None of this is widely used because it's still new technology. It's absolutely an area where you're finding predictive analytics and AI being involved, and I can see that being marrying that with blockchain technology. So definitely.
Do you think IBM is going to control this, or will there be open standards that will control things?
I think IBM will be sort of a reasonably sized player. I think standards are going to evolve and be adopted. There are some big international standards, something, GS1 and people like that.
GS1 has a whole initiative to work with blockchain with this and the other food partners that are doing that now. And they're the largest international standard for
Yeah. So I think, I'm pretty sure standards are going to play a big part in it. They kind of have to, because supply chains are hugely fragmented, and food supply chains are even more hugely fragmented. So.
When the word consortium kind of infers that there are three standards.
Right. Yeah. there needs to be some standard. Is it an open standard or is it an IBM standard? Or is it a bit of a mixture of the two? I'm not sure, but any more? We can also move to the demonstration, which will be of food, beverages in the bar downstairs. Okay, great. Well, it's late. Thanks everyone for staying. We're packing a lot into these meetups because we've got a lot to do. Richard, one question?
Do you think blockchain would help smaller food suppliers?
Yes. Yes, and we've got a book about that too. We produced about a month ago. I'll send you a copy. Good. Great. Thank you, Ive.